Hit it.
Welcome to the Test Talks Podcast, the place to go to geek out on software testing. And now your host, whose mission is to help you succeed with test automation, Joe Colantonio.
Hey, it's Joe, and welcome to another episode of Test Talks. So are you looking for ways to improve your continuous delivery testing process? Do you want to incorporate new technologies like AI and machine learning to help? In this episode, we'll be test talking with testing superstar and popular conference speaker Lisa Crispin, co-author of More Agile Testing, Learning Journeys for the Whole Team, and Agile Testing, a practical guide for testers and agile teams. She shares her views and tips on a whole bunch of things around testing and continuous delivery, as well as what she'll be doing in her new role as a test advocate at Mabl. Really cool stuff. You don't want to miss it. Listen up. And just a quick heads up here. This is the first interview I've done in my new office. Well, it's a long story. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm renting a house in Tennessee, in Chattanooga, and I'm building a house in Oakdale, Tennessee. So rather than travel back and forth between Rhode Island and Oakdale, I decided to rent a house in Chattanooga while we try selling a house in Rhode Island and while I meet with the builder in Oakdale. So the reason why I tell you that is I'm still getting used to this room. I still don't think I have it soundproofed correctly, and I don't have my equipment. I can't find all my equipment yet from the boxes that I have down here. So I had to do this interview on Zoom, and the audio quality for me was kind of off, and I don't know why. Lisa's was fine, but mine was off. So what I tried to do is go back and re-record my parts, but I wasn't able to get all of them because it didn't sound natural. So like I said, Lisa's parts were fine. It's just mine were a little off. So just hang in tight. The content here that Lisa shares is awesome, and I'm really excited about her new role at Mabl, and I think you should be too. So check it out. Also in this episode, Lisa does touch upon a little bit how she tries to encourage more diversity at conferences with the speakers, and how she does some mentoring to help them with their papers in order to get accepted as speakers. Along those lines, I just want to also let you know that the call for speakers at the Automation Guild 2019 online conference is now up. So if you're a first-time speaker, but you're also a testing expert, you're either afraid to talk in front of large crowds, or you can't afford the expense of traveling to somewhere to do the speaking, or for some reason you've just been putting it off, this is your chance to shine and share automation awesomeness with the masses. And also, it is the largest automation conference in the world for online conferences, right? So for online conferences, this is the biggest one that I'm aware of in the world dedicated to automation. So you get awesome exposure as well as be able to share a tip, tool, technique that's going to help your fellow automation engineers create automation awesomeness. So check it out. Head on over to guild.show/speaker. So I apologize. That was a chatty intro, but let's get to the good stuff now with Lisa Crispin. Test Talks is sponsored by the fantastic folks at Sauce Labs, the cloud-based automated testing platform that eliminates the need to maintain your own Selenium grid and test infrastructure. Try it for free today. Visit testtalks.com and click on the Sign Up Now link under the homepage sponsor section. Hey Lisa, welcome back to Test Talks.
All right, it's great to be on again. I feel honored.
Today, I'd like to talk about your awesome new gig at Mabl and, of course, continuous delivery. But before we get into it, could you just tell us a little bit more of what you've been up to since the last time we spoke on Test Talks? Way back in episode 101, I believe that was almost 2 years ago.
Ooh, it's been so long, I don't remember.
It's been 2 years.
It hasn't been that long. Wow. Yeah, just lots of learning and experimenting with my previous team at Pivotal Tracker, trying out different ways of focusing really on trying to get that shared understanding up front of what features we wanted to deliver so that we made sure that they were valuable to the customers and that the design was where everybody wanted it to be, and not trying to do big design up front, but just making sure everybody's on the same page. How can we do that? How can we collaborate more effectively so that we're not going in a lot of different directions, and we can shorten the cycle time of when we start working on a feature to when we deliver it. And hopefully first time we deliver it, it's what our product people want. It's what our customers want. So that's a lot of it. And, I've been fortunate to participate in conferences around the world and pair with a lot of awesome new speakers to do sessions that I've been learning a lot. And that's kind of led me in the direction of getting more interested in continuous delivery and deploy pipelines and DevOps and things like that. I've been working with a lot of awesome practitioners who have more expertise in those areas than I do, and it's a great way to learn.
All right, so I'm already off script. I have to ask, when you mentioned pairing, you actually pair with people you meet at conferences? How does that work?
I generally, if I'm lucky enough to, usually I'm invited to speak at a conference or I mainly do interactive sessions, workshops, and tutorials. And so I always ask the organizers if I could pair, and I try to find someone who wants to get into conference speaking or has just started, but they're lacking in confidence or they're having trouble getting their proposals accepted because, that some of these conferences, it's quite competitive to get your proposal onto the program. And so I also want to bring more diversity to conferences. So I try to find, especially to find women who want to get into presenting and just need a helping hand with somebody to give them some confidence. And it's worked really well. I've paired with lots of people, women and men, and most of them have gone on to have really amazing speaking careers. So I'm really excited to do my own small part to bring new voices to conferences and improve the diversity.
Very cool. So it almost sounds like it's a two-way street. It's not just you, the expert, imparting wisdom on folks that pair with you. It's also the person you're pairing with teaching you some things you may not know and probably enlarging your understanding of things, how things are working in the real world at different companies with continuous delivery, continuous integration.
Exactly. In most of the time, they're the ones who come up with the content ideas. And so I can just help, format it and make sure we have the right amount of content for the time slot that we have and come up with effective exercises that people can get hands-on practice and things like that. So it's quite collaborative and it's a great way for me to learn too.
Very cool. So I think this is big news. When I saw it, I was blown away. I think Mabl did an awesome slam dunk hire by hiring you. But I'm just curious to know, I'm sure, you're very popular. You're a thought leader. People must ask you to work for them all the time. So what made you decide to go at Mabl?
I wish that were true, Joe.
Oh, really?
It was just total serendipity. My husband and I had decided to move to Vermont for a variety of reasons, mainly because we could. And so I was looking for remote working opportunities. We have 3 donkeys and we have to live on acreage for the donkeys, and trying to work in a major metropolitan area and commute in, it's just not affordable to have acreage outside of the places we would like to live and work. So we decided, well, let's just go for the total remote thing, to move to Vermont and find a remote working gig. And it just happened at the time. I've been really interested in machine learning. In fact, my manager, Joe Webb, last fall was saying, everybody's talking about machine learning and testing and test automation, and we should find out more about that. And so I started looking around. And of course, I listened to your podcast with Dan Belcher of Mabl and said, that's interesting. And actually, that was the product that came up the most when I was kind of Googling around looking for test automation tools that use machine learning. And so I tried it out, and then I discovered that my friend Stephen Vance is a developer at Mabl. And so he was kind enough to help us get started, give us a demo. And it was one of those things, though, where you get the demo and then you get busy and you don't get back to it for a few months. And so when I got back to it, I discovered that they were going to be sponsoring the Agile Testing Days conference in Boston, which I was presenting at. And so I asked Steve if he could spend some time with me at the conference to get me more up to speed, because I'd been trying Mabl and doing some more things with it at work? And he said, sure. And I said, and by the way, we're moving to Vermont. And so I want a remote working job, and it would be really cool to work for a company based in Boston because it's so close. So if you hear of anything, let me know. And he said, well, as a matter of fact. So that's what led me down this road. Just my interest in machine learning with testing and knowing somebody who happened to work there and being really interested in the product. And it just everything kind of led to this great opportunity.
Very cool. So this is just a personal question. I'm in the middle of moving and planning moving to Tennessee. I just have a dog and 2 cats, and I'm finding that to be a hassle to find a hotel that allows cats and dogs. So how are you actually moving 3 donkeys across country?
Well, horsemotels.com.
Oh.
So yeah, I found great. It was like planning a military invasion because so you can only really equines can only be in a trailer for so long each day because it's quite tiring for them. And so planning where to stop and making sure that we had the right distance every day. Well, it was a little challenging, but we did the trip in 4 days and 3 nights and found 3 wonderful places to stay. And 2 of those places actually had accommodations for humans as well. So that was really nice. But we also have cats and dogs. So we rented an RV to take the cats and dogs. And then we had our car as well. So fortunately, we have very kind siblings and a nephew and in-laws who volunteered to help us drive across country with that whole caravan. It was quite an adventure.
Very cool. So I guess back to the subject at hand. What is going to be your title at Mabl?
I'm the testing advocate. It was kind of hard to come up with a title that captured what we hope I can do. So, but the idea is, advocate for testers, advocate for testing, help the testing community find ways to use new technology to meet some of our new challenges. It's, testing and test automation was always hard, and now we have even more complicated situations to deal with. So that's what I'm hoping to help do. I'm not out to sell you a particular product or even a particular technology, but let's explore together what we think might work. What can we experiment with? What can we try? Making sure that testers get the visibility they deserve and that testing gets visibility it deserves. This is a central part of software development, of continuous delivery, of DevOps, however you want to phrase that. We can't lose sight of the importance of testing.
All right, awesome. So how's that actually going to work? I know your title is Test Advocate. So are you going to still speak at conferences and then speak with users and get a sense for what people are struggling with, and then taking that information back to Mabl to try to help them roll up some features that might be able to assist people in their day-to-day jobs with what you've been hearing in the field?
That's certainly part of it. Getting ideas from other people and also learning about what their challenges are. That is a big part of it. But I think for me, it's also I want to go and help people get more confident about continuous delivery. How can their team get traction on continuous delivery? It's kind of the holy grail. Everybody wants to do it. A few years ago, it was continuous integration. That was a challenge. Now it's continuous delivery. But especially a lot of testers I run into, they just feel a bit intimidated. They don't know the terminology. They don't know the jargon. They're not sure where they fit and how they can contribute. And so that's one thing I would like to do is to help people learn the language of it, learn how they can get engaged in it with the rest of their team. Because as with all testing, I really feel like this is a whole team activity, a whole team responsibility. We all need to work together in order to be successful and to feel confident to deliver a product or deliver changes to our product so frequentely and not ruin our customers' day by putting something out that breaks lots of things. We've always had problems with how can testing keep up? And then we had Agile and Agile, we're going to release every 2 weeks. How can testing keep up? And now we're saying, well, we're releasing maybe every day or maybe multiple times a day. How can testing keep up? It's pretty crazy. So that's a big problem that everybody wants to solve, and I want to help people do that.
So Lisa, you're an Uber tester, right? And now you're working for a machine learning AI-based company. What do you say to people that, for some reason I hear this a lot from testers, they think that actually machine learning or AI is going to replace them, or that these types of companies are out to replace them? What do you say to people that have a fear of actually losing their jobs to these technologies?
I hear that a lot, but it's interesting. I've talked to a couple of people, in particular, somebody I worked with at my last job who is interested in machine learning, and they feel like if anybody's going to be out of a job, it's going to be programmers, because you can teach a machine to code by giving it huge amounts of examples of good code and bad code, and it can learn how to write good code. But whether it can learn how to do all the different kinds of testing we need to do, that's probably a little problematic. It's hard to imagine a machine doing exploratory testing. You could probably teach it maybe to do specific types of accessibility testing, security testing, things like that. But knowing that there are so many things where we have to be humans, because humans are going to use our software, and we have to know how they're going to use it. That's still going to require humans. So, the whole testing is dead and replaced by automation or replaced by machine learning. I don't know why we keep hearing that, and I'm sure the number of testers is growing exponentially every year. But I know that there are individual companies where they said, oh, yeah, we don't need these testers anymore because we have this automation tool, or now we have this AI that we can replace them with. I'm sure that's going to happen in some cases, but they're going to probably realize that was a mistake and go looking for their testers again. It's the wrong place to focus. The focus is, how can we take these new technologies and free our brains up to do more value add activities than the repetitive things we can automate.
Love it. I'm glad you mentioned that, because you never hear that usually. Well, it's going to replace developers. It's always testers for some reason. I've never understood, right? So it's awesome. So interesting, though, you are going to focus on continuous delivery. How would machine learning free up us to do other activities you think that testers really are great at? Well,
I know with my own previous team, I think I've just been reading the State of DevOps report, and I would classify my previous team probably in the elite performer category. We were doing a pretty good job with moving towards continuous delivery, always having a deployable release candidate, releasing twice a week. But we did have problems. And one of our problems was we had thousands of UI regression tests, automated regression tests. And like so many other teams, we had some that were flaky. They would time out, or, Chrome would upgrade their version and the test would break, or there's just so many things that can happen to cause your UI test to fail. And sometimes I just wonder that it's the phase of the moon or how the stars are aligned. And so that's one problem. The other problem is the length of time it takes. And so our deploy pipeline was really taking a long time, and so if anything failed and we had to start over, well, that was a long time again to wait. And you don't have, depending on your domain, you may or may not have a big window of time that you can deploy every day. And I feel like if you can't get a fix out to production quickly, let's say you do deploy to production, and then you monitor and you realize you have a big problem, you need to rush out a hot fix. If you can't do that fast, you can't do continuous delivery, because this is my opinion, we've never been able to test all the things. We have to focus our testing on the things that are the most valuable to customers, but it's impossible, in my opinion, to test everything in an exact copy of a production environment and know exactly how it's going to work in production. There's always going to be something that could happen in production. But what's critical is that we identify it quickly with our monitoring and observing, and that we can get a fix out really, really quickly. And, if your deploy pipeline is fragile, you're not going to get a fix out really quickly. And so it all breaks down. And so machine learning, the advantage of that is, for example, in the case of Mabl, it has these self-healing tests. So it takes in so much information about each page, each UI web page, that it can start to make guesses of, oh, I can't find this element, but I can find this other element and it has many of the same characteristics. I think this is probably the same thing and it's just moved or put in a different place or gotten renamed. And so let's go ahead and go with this element, see if we can continue on. And so adding that ability to keep the test running and report back and say, okay, the test finished and it passed, and here's the change that I saw. We can analyze that information later. But meanwhile, our deploy happens. So we didn't wait around and have to retry a bunch of times. And I think that's part of the solution is just taking advantage of these technologies. The machine can analyze that data so much faster. We can take in the machine can take in all those huge amounts of data and analyze them so quickly and make all these guesses based on the patterns and the categorizations and things like that, classifications, and continue on. And I think that's a big part of it. The other big part that I'm really excited about is looking at the production data. And again, as humans, it's hard to process these giant amounts of data, but if we have tools that can help us and say, oh, what are people actually using the most in our product? And what problems, what pain points are they running into? Machine learning, I mean, I don't know very much about machine learning, I'll be honest, but what seems to be true is machine learning can help us identify these things, like what are people using the most, what problems might they be having, do we have good test coverage for that, are we having a lot of regression failures in that area, oh, we need to beef up our regression tests in this area, and even feeding back to obviously the feature development of, oh, people are really using this feature, but they're having a problem in this one location of it. How can we help them? I think that's what machine learning and artificial intelligence are going to add to our toolbox.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I know a lot of teams, as they go towards continuous integration, a lot of times they have a lot of automated tests that fail. Mm-hmm. By the time they debug what's happening, the next build has gone off, and it's
right.
too late. So using machine learning for these insights is only going to empower a tester to go, oh, wait a minute. All this historical data is showing that this feature file always fails, or this scenario, or the performance is always bad on Tuesday. Stuff like that. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, the performance patterns and things like that are also really important. And that's the kind of thing where, myself as a tester, it's like, wow, I'm so focused just on the functionality. I'm not even necessarily paying attention to the performance. And that can really bite you. So these tools help us cover so much more ground so that we don't forget or lose things. We can have our tool alert us.
Awesome. So I know you said you are focusing on continuous delivery. Another question I get asked a lot is, people assume everything needs to be automated because we're releasing quickly as fast as possible. So where in the pipeline do like the activity of manually testing or exploratory testing comes in when you're dealing with continuous delivery?
I think that's one of the things I've learned this during the past year, pairing with all these wonderful people like Abby Bangser and Ashley Hunsberger on continuous delivery and pipelines and things like that, is that, your production deployed pipeline probably has a lot of manual steps to it. We only think about the automated steps, but you're right. We need things like exploratory testing. And we might want to do some manual exploring on our accessibility or our security. There are lots of things we do, and a lot of continuous delivery is a process. No, you're not just going to jump out of the box with everything automated. So perhaps some of your deploys are going to be manual to certain test environments and so on. So there are a lot of potential manual steps. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. It just would be nicer to automate as much as possible and shorten that cycle time and that feedback loop. But it's okay for some things to be manual, and that may mean that we're doing exploratory testing, but we're not necessarily going to hold up each deploy for that because it takes a while. And that's where monitoring is really important. So we need to be continually exploratory testing our product. We may not be able to do we're definitely not going to be able to do full exploratory testing on every build, but we can certainly focus on every new feature. For every new feature set, let's plan to do exploratory testing. Let's let's do some Mabl exploratory testing on it. Let's pair. Let's do a lot of collaboration. Make sure we're covering a lot of things. But at the same time, we're monitoring production. So if we do miss something, we're gonna be able to see that with production data. And this is where I'm really keen on Alan Page and Brent Jensen's modern testing principles. As testers, we need to learn some of this. I mean, I don't think I can become a data scientist, but I can learn some analysis techniques and learn to use tools that help me with that so that I can learn from production use. And that's going to feed back into my exploratory testing. Let's focus that testing on what's adding the most value to customers. I don't feel like we've ever had time to test every little thing. Now, again, I'm talking, this is all context sensitive. Right. So if I were testing some kind of embedded software for a medical device that was life or death if it failed, I would probably test every little thing I thought of. But if I'm testing a project tracking tool, not so much. So depending on the domain, it may be more important to focus testing in certain areas. And for the rest of it, let's rely on our monitoring. That means we have to pay attention to our monitoring. It's so embarrassing when you have your monitoring up on literally on a monitor on the wall and nobody's looking at it. There's a big failure. So we have to be disciplined about noticing when things are going wrong and really diligent about doing that monitoring to supplement what we can do up front. We've got to do testing and production.
So that's a great point. A lot of times, no matter what with results, a lot of times teams ignore the feedback. So how do you encourage people to pay attention to your dashboards?
That can be a real sore point.
Yeah.
I think part of it is just a team commitment to, as a team, we are going to respond to either our pipeline, our build breaks, our pipeline fails, or we see a problem in production and decide together if we are finding that we're ignoring those things, because people get heads down pairing and programming, and especially like my last team, everybody paired 100% of the time. And when you're pairing with somebody, you get so involved that you don't necessarily notice that you got a message from your deploy pipeline on Slack saying it failed, right? You just don't notice because you're just so in the zone with your pair. And so what can we do? And so one of the things that my team did was just get together. We just got people together and said, okay, let's brainstorm on how we can make this visible to ourselves so we can get into better habits. And so we actually had a little 30-minute session where we all drew something that we thought would get our attention when the build failed. And so several of us drew like a police light that was hooked up to the build. So if the pipeline failed, a police light would go off on the office. Some were, or maybe something would come up in your browser and stop you from using your browser until the build gets fixed or whatever. I tried to be positive, so I designed a chocolate dispenser that if you were the one who fixed the broken build, that you got some chocolate. And we ended up going with the police light. And again, that's not something that you should use forever, but just something big and visible to remind you of the problem until you get into a better habit. Sometimes it can take a while to build a new good habit.
So Lisa, I know you just started, but is there anything you've learned since you've been at Mabl about either a feature they have or any AI or machine learning type method that people could use right away to help them with their testing efforts?
Oh gosh, I've learned so much. It's kind of overwhelming at this point. Part of it, one thing I think that is valuable, and again, it comes into monitoring production, is being able to have smoke tests, even something as simple as link checking running on your site every day and monitoring the performance of the page loads and stuff. Hopefully nothing's ever going to happen, but, one day you may find that suddenly your homepage has started loading really slowly, or, or your product stopped working in an IE 11, which really happened to the product I was working on a couple months ago. You need to be alerted to those things. And so these machine learning tools are really good at being able to handle those kind of jobs. And just, that's just a whole lot. That's just something you don't even have to worry about until there is some kind of alert. until something is not normal. And then you can look at it, but otherwise you just don't have to think about it. And the ease of debugging, I think having a tool that helps you identify quickly what the problem is, or even to say, I found this visual difference, and I didn't fail the test because of it, but you might want to look at it. Those kind of things are super helpful. And like today, the feature of Mabl I learned about today was that it has a capability of having data-driven tests. So you can feed in different rows of data of here are the inputs and here's the expected output, that sort of thing. And you can upload a spreadsheet into Mabl and configure that. But I learned today that you can train your tests and fill in placeholder variables, and then you can generate your table of data from that, and then add to it. Just little time savers like that. Just making this work less tedious and painful, I think, is huge. Automation has always been scary to me, even though I've been doing it since the early 90s. It's just always scary to me when I start on a new automation project. So taking some of the tedious and onerous work out of it helps me have the courage to face the fear.
Absolutely. And I love how you mentioned, I think there's a feature for visual validation where it actually requires a human to look at and say, is this really a bug? Which I kind of love, because you're using automation, but you're also using the brain of a tester to see if it's an actual issue. Is that something that's in Mabl? It bubbles up an insight that says there's a visual difference than what we noticed before?
Exactly. You can go and look and see what visual differences it's found, and then decide if it's a problem or not. And I think that's super valuable, because having to do it yourself, like how many times in my life have I said, okay, well, I'm going to look at the old version in this window and the new version in this window and see what I can spot. Or even using a visual diffing tool and running it and looking at it. Again, it's tedious, but if you have something that just can automatically tell you, oh, I think there's a difference, make sure that looks okay to you. Just a big time saver. People don't want to do this work at all when it's so tedious and difficult to do, and it needs to be done. So a lot of testing that probably hasn't gotten done because nobody really wants to do it. Now we have a way to make it possible to do it without it being painful.
So, Lisa, a lot of times with DevOps, people hear DevOps, they don't think about testing, and I think it's actually critical to the DevOps process. So, how essential is testing to DevOps to actually be successful with it?
Yeah, somebody coined the term DevOps back in 2009, and it was nice. And then it really got people interested in building a DevOps culture and moving into continuous delivery. But it does depend on testing. If you don't have the confidence to spring your new software onto the world several times a day, you're not going to be able to do it. And if you go back and read Jez Hummel and David Farley's book, Continuous Delivery, which I think is from 2009 or 2010, that book is all about testing. When I was actually a reviewer on that book, and I was like, continuous delivery, what's that? And it turned out it was something we were doing. We just didn't have a word for it. But I was just amazed. It's like, these people really understand testing, and it's really at the core of everything. We want to have our automated tests to free up our time to do all these more valuable activities, more ways we can contribute as human beings to the process. And I feel like the term DevOps has caused a loss of visibility of testers and testing. People don't understand they need to involve their testers in this process. We have so much we can contribute. We ask questions that nobody else asks. And especially when we're starting with a new feature and we're trying to find that shared understanding, we're all on the same page about, why are we doing this feature? What value is it going to bring to the business? What value is it going to bring to our customers? If you don't have testers in the room asking questions that nobody else thought of, I think you're going to miss a lot of stuff. We need to realize the contributions that testers can make, and especially if we have solid test automation that doesn't take everybody's time to keep it running and keep it maintained, and frees us up the time to do discovery and to learn about our product and to learn, what features are missing and what pain points our customers having that we need to address. Testers just play such a hugely important role in that. I was listening to Alan Page and Brent Jensen's podcast recently, and one of them commented about testing is kind of a profession because nobody else wants to do it. The developers say, "Oh, I don't want to do testing." Now, I feel like that has changed, especially with Agile development. Everybody on an Agile team is very interested in testing, which is that's why I love Agile so much. But it's still kind of true. Do your developers want to automate your UI tests? Probably not. So there are things that testers can contribute that they have a passion for, or we have a passion for these things that people who have other skill sets and other perspectives, that's not their passion. They're not a tester. So we need that diversity on the team. And we need to remember the central role of testing and that we need testing specialists. And now, of course, as a testing specialist, I feel like part of my job is to be a consultant for other people on the team that aren't testers and help them acquire better testing skills to help them with their work and help them build quality into that product. I think that's an important role that we play.
Absolutely. And in that book by Jez Humble, only a small portion was dedicated to UI automation or UI testing. And I actually see that as a crutch for a lot of teams that I work with. Maybe they're just dysfunctional, that all their testing strategy is just UI-based automation, where, like you said, testing is essential, but it's not just UI testing. It's all forms of testing, unit testing, integration testing. Is that something that you think is critical for DevOps as well?
Well, sure. I mean, all levels of testing, unit level, API and service level testing is obviously, I think in most contexts, that testing pyramid really helps us. So let's push those tests down to the lower levels where we can do them more efficiently and cheaply. And but of course, UIs become more important as our business logic and bells and whistles in our UIs. But yeah, there's a lot more even than the test automation to it. So the automation is just what we need to free up our time to do these things that are even more valuable. We've got to automate the regression testing. We've got to automate the things that we can automate that are tedious and nobody really wants to do, or they're not going to get done if we don't automate them. So that's to do all these other activities that we can really, really help build quality in.
Okay, Lisa, before we go, is there one piece of actionable advice you can give us to improve our test automation efforts, DevOps efforts, or our machine learning AI efforts? And let us know the best way to find or contact you.
I would say I've been talking to people about this recently, and one of the things that people have said that I think is really interesting is build relationships. Katrina Clokey talks about this in her practical guide to testing and DevOps, and in a lot of the times, as a tester, I can go to somebody else on the team who's not a tester and say, how can I help you? What could we do together to solve a problem? And it could just start with just something personal of, hey, how's your day going? Gosh, nice weather we have today. Just building those personal relationships and starting a relationship so we can start collaborating together. Because I really do believe we need the whole team. We need the diverse skill sets. We need diverse perspectives. We need to work together. And we need to connect as humans first to be able to do that. And so I would say go out and forge some new relationships. And the best way to get a hold of me is probably on Twitter. I'm just at Lisa Crispin. And I love to hear about what other people are doing and learn from them and help with any questions that other people might have.
Thank you, Lisa, for your testing awesomeness, and congratulations on your new gig at Mabl. For links to everything of value we covered in this episode, head on over to testtalks.com/218. And while you're there, make sure to click on that sign up for a free trial link under the exclusive sponsor section to learn all about our awesome sponsor, Sauce Labs. And as I mentioned, the call for papers for Automation Guild 2019 is now open. Submit your session idea now. Just head on over to guild.show/speaker. So that's it for this episode of Test Talks. I'm Joe, and my mission is to help you succeed with creating automation awesomeness. As always, test everything and keep the good. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Test Talks podcast. Head on over to www.testtalks.com for full show notes, amazing amazing blog articles, and other automation awesomeness.